In January 1967, Nigeria's most powerful military officers crossed into Ghana because they no longer trusted one another enough to meet safely inside their own country. They gathered at a government retreat in Aburi. At the center were two young lieutenant colonels, Yakubu Gowon, controlling the federal government in Lagos, and Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, military governor of the Eastern region. They were officers in the same army and survivors of a year in which Nigeria had almost destroyed itself. Two coups had shattered the chain of command. Senior politicians and officers had been murdered. Thousands of Easterners had been killed in northern cities. Refugees were flooding into the east. Yet, in Aburi, the men talked. They rejected force as a solution and agreed that major national decisions should be taken collectively. For a brief moment, Nigeria appeared to have stepped back from the edge. 5 months later, Ojukwu declared the Republic of Biafra. Weeks after that, Gowon sent federal troops into the east. Nigeria's tragedy was not simply that its leaders failed to find peace. At Aburi, they found a possible path. The tragedy was that they returned home, believing it led to two different countries. Welcome to history's darkest deals, where we uncover the secret agreements, broken promises, and struggles for power that changed nations forever. Today we examine Ojukwu, Gowon, and the failed agreement that stood between Nigeria and one of modern Africa's most devastating wars. Gowon was only 31 when he became head of state in 1966. He came from the minority Ngas community of northern Nigeria, outside the region's dominant political establishment. Ojukwu was 32 when 1966 began. The son of one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen, he had studied history at Oxford before choosing the army. He was intelligent, forceful, and deeply conscious of military procedure. Gowon spoke the language of national unity. Ojukwu increasingly spoke the language of regional survival. Gowon feared that allowing the East to leave would cause Nigeria to disintegrate. Ojukwu came to fear that remaining inside Nigeria would leave Easterners defenseless. Neither entered 1966 publicly preparing for war. Their positions hardened as the country made compromise look increasingly like surrender. Nigeria became independent from Britain in 1960, but independence did not erase the regional system colonial rule had helped create. Politics revolved around powerful regions with different leaderships, interests, and ethnic majorities. Elections became struggles over census figures, federal appointments, and public revenue. By the mid-1960s, disputed elections and violence, especially in the western region, had weakened civilian rule. Then, on January 15, 1966, young army officers launched Nigeria's first military coup. They killed Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Northern Premier Ahmadu Bello, Western Premier Samuel Akintola, and several senior officers. The coup failed to capture the whole country, and Army Commander Major General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi emerged as head of state. The ethnic pattern of the killings proved explosive. Several leading plotters were Igbo, while prominent Igbo politicians and officers survived. Across much of the north, the coup was interpreted as an Igbo attempt to seize Nigeria, although its motives were more complicated, and Ojukwu had opposed it from his command in Kano. Ironsi then replaced the federal structure with a centralized system. His government presented unification as a cure for destructive regionalism. Many Northerners saw it as confirmation that an Igbo-led government intended to destroy their regional power. Facts were disappearing beneath fear. In July 1966, Northern soldiers struck back. Mutineers seized Ironsi and the Western military governor, Adekunle Fajuyi, in Ibadan. Both men were killed. Across military formations, Igbo officers were targeted and the Nigerian army fractured along regional lines. Gowon emerged as head of state. Ojukwu questioned the transition, arguing that military hierarchy had been ignored and that the more senior Brigadier Babafemi Ogundipe should have assumed command. To Ojukwu, Gowon's rise showed that mutineers, not formal military procedure, now determined who ruled Nigeria. Beyond the barracks, the violence became more terrifying. Igbo people and other Easterners were attacked in parts of northern Nigeria. Estimates of the dead vary sharply, but the killings drove an enormous refugee population toward the east. Trains and lorries arrived carrying survivors, wounded people, and families abandoning homes built over generations. Some northerners in the east also suffered retaliatory attacks. But the refugees transformed Eastern politics. The crisis entered homes, markets, churches, and village meetings. People asked Ojukwu a question Lagos had not answered. If they were Nigerians, who would protect them? For Gowon, preserving the federation remained the government's duty. For Ojukwu, protection came first. Unity and security no longer meant the same thing. Ghana's military leader, Lieutenant General Joseph Ankra, offered neutral ground. On January 4th and 5th, 1967, Nigeria's military leaders met at Aburi. They discussed the army, displaced civilians, federal authority, and Nigeria's future. They rejected force as a solution. They accepted collective decision-making at the highest level. They discussed returning considerable authority to the regions and reorganizing military commands. But the agreement contained the seed of another conflict. Ojukwu understood Aburi as a commitment to radical decentralization. The regions would possess enough power to protect themselves against unilateral orders from Lagos. Nigeria would remain together, but it would function almost like a confederation. Gowon returned to federal officials, who considered that interpretation dangerous. They warned that it could reduce the central government to little more than a name and allow the regions to ignore Lagos whenever they wished. The federal government issued Decree No. 8, claiming that it implemented Aburi while preserving federal emergency powers. Ojukwu rejected it, insisting that Lagos had changed what was agreed in Ghana. The story is often reduced to a simple accusation. One side honored Aburi, while the other betrayed it. But the deeper problem was that both sides had accepted the same language before confronting all its consequences. Ojukwu believed that without regional control, the East remained vulnerable to a government that had failed to stop mass killing. Gowon believed Ojukwu's interpretation would dissolve Nigeria without anyone openly admitting it. They had agreed on the words. They had never agreed on the country those words would create. As the dispute continued, both governments took measures that made retreat harder. The East assumed control over federal institutions and revenues within the region. Lagos increased economic pressure and treated Ojukwu's actions as open defiance. Then, on May 27, 1967, Gowon replaced Nigeria's 4 regions with 12 states. For minority communities long afraid of domination inside the large regions, state creation offered protection. It also broke the political power of the old northern region. But the former eastern region was divided into 3 states. Much of the oil-producing Niger Delta was separated from the Igbo heartland. To Gowon, the new states protected minorities and stopped one regional government from speaking for everyone. To Ojukwu, the timing looked like an attempt to divide the East, remove its resources, and destroy its bargaining power. 3 days later, on May 30th, Ojukwu proclaimed the Independent Republic of Biafra. The Eastern Consultative Assembly had authorized him, and many frightened refugees viewed separation not as ambition, but as refuge. Yet the declaration transformed a constitutional crisis into a direct challenge to Nigeria's existence. Ojukwu decided that independence was less dangerous than remaining. Gowon decided that successful secession could destroy the federation. One claimed he was protecting a people. The other claimed he was protecting a country. Both prepared to use soldiers to prove it. On July 6, 1967, federal troops advanced into Biafran territory. Gowon's government described the offensive as a limited police action. Federal leaders believed Nigeria's larger population, greater resources, and access to the sea would force a rapid collapse. Ojukwu believed determination would compensate for Biafra's smaller army and limited supplies. He expected Easterners to fight because many believed defeat could expose them once again to massacre. He also hoped international sympathy would make a prolonged federal campaign impossible. Then Biafra launched a daring counterstroke. In August, its forces crossed the River Niger into the Midwestern region, captured Benin City, and moved toward the road to Lagos. But the advance stalled. Federal forces reorganized, drove the Biafrans back, and captured Enugu in October. The map steadily narrowed around Ojukwu's government. Federal forces took ports, oil-producing areas, and major towns. Biafra moved its administration from one shrinking center to another. Both leaders had miscalculated. Gowon believed military strength would end the conflict before civilians paid an unbearable price. Ojukwu believed Nigeria would fracture, foreign powers would intervene, or Biafra would become impossible to defeat. Instead, the war continued for 30 months. As Biafra lost its coastline and transport routes, the war moved from the battlefield into the human body. Food became scarce. Medicines disappeared. Children developed kwashiorkor, their bodies swelling from severe protein deficiency. Families walked for days seeking relief centers that were themselves running out of supplies. The federal blockade was intended to prevent weapons, fuel, and revenue from sustaining secession. Gowon's government argued that uncontrolled relief routes could be used to smuggle arms and prolong the war. But the blockade also restricted food and medicine. By 1968, photographs of starving Biafran children were appearing around the world. Aid organizations flew dangerous nighttime missions into the shrinking territory, making Biafra a defining humanitarian emergency of the television age. The war also became international. Britain and the Soviet Union supported the federal government. France covertly assisted Biafra, while Tanzania, Gabon, Côte d'Ivoire, and Zambia recognized it. Foreign involvement did not save the people trapped inside. Death estimates vary enormously, but civilians, especially children, died in vast numbers from starvation and disease. And the moral questions grew darker. How long could Gowon defend a blockade after its civilian consequences became undeniable? How long could Ojukwu continue resistance once victory appeared remote and the population he claimed to protect was starving? Military logic gave both men reasons to continue. Civilians paid for every additional month. By January 1970, Biafra had collapsed into disconnected pockets. Its troops were exhausted, its people were starving, and federal forces were advancing. Ojukwu left for Côte d'Ivoire, saying his departure would make peace easier. His deputy, Major General Philip Effiong, assumed authority and announced that Biafra would stop fighting. Gowon addressed the country and declared that there would be no victor and no vanquished. He offered an amnesty and announced a program of reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. The feared mass execution of defeated Biafran troops did not follow. But official reconciliation did not erase the consequences. Towns had been destroyed. Families had lost property, savings, and relatives. Policies involving abandoned property and the limited repayment of pre-war bank deposits deepened the feeling among many former Biafrans that surrender had not brought equal restoration. Gowon preserved Nigeria on the map. Whether Nigeria repaired what the war had broken was another question. Ojukwu and Gowon did not create every force that destroyed the peace. They did not design the colonial federation. They did not invent the rivalries of the First Republic. They did not launch the January coup, murder Iransi, or personally carry out the massacres that terrified the East. But leadership is judged not only by the crises people inherit. It is judged by the decisions when every available choice is dangerous. Gowon chose a united Nigeria, enforced by federal power. He feared that allowing Biafra to leave would trigger the country's collapse. Ojukwu chose an independent Biafra, defended by force. He feared that remaining inside Nigeria would expose Easterners to violence without protection. Between them stood Aburi, not a perfect treaty, but the last serious framework through which both men might have stepped away from war. Perhaps Nigeria was not taken to war by one villain and one hero. Perhaps it was taken there by colonial fault lines, political ambition, military revenge, ethnic fear, oil, and a collapse of trust so complete that compromise resembled betrayal. But Gowon and Ojukwu held power when the final doors closed. One refused to let the East leave. The other refused to make it remain. And by the time both men understood how long the war would last, ordinary Nigerians were already paying the price.